The Butcher, a cruel and visceral abomination of Silent Hill, a merciless serial killer that tortures and mutilates its victims without remorse. Tall, muscular, with half his face covered in metal and the other one flayed and mangled beyond recognition. His physique, his posture, and even his butcher's apron, as well as his unproportionally large weapon, all of this is very reminiscent of another character in the Silent Hill lore. Yes, Pyramid Head. The Butcher is, briefly put, Travis Grady's version of the same being. His actions, his appearance, his mannerisms, they're all a projection of a secret that lies deep within Travis's Jungian shadow, a truth about himself that is so dark and so seminal that his mind has repressed it and locked away deep inside his unconscious, a truth he doesn't even know about, and that requires a spiritual guide like the Butcher to lead him to that revelation. But what is that truth about the lonesome and helpful truck driver? Let's start our investigation with Travis's mental state. His personality throughout the game can be described as somewhat stoic, slightly cynical, and emotionally rather shut and distant. But very early in the game, we get the first hints that he might have mental issues.
Travis, you messed up son of a bitch. What you doing on my road?
Late on a gig, bud. I'm taking the shortcut past Silent Hill. Stopping for coffee as soon as I hit Brahms. I'm beat.
Bad dreams still keeping you awake? I told you, man. A girl or two would go a long way.
This doesn't have to mean anything on its own, but on our journey through Silent Hill, we find a number of clues that point to a very specific mental condition Travis Grady suffers from. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition that is often associated with mental long-term damage of war veterans, but it also develops under various different circumstances in which a person was exposed to traumatic events in their past, for example child abuse or an imminent threat on the person's life. Travis Grady shows many clear symptoms of a PTSD victim. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5th edition, or DSM-5, those are exposure to a stressful event of exceptionally threatening or catastrophic nature. Now, this is the first major revelation we find out about Travis's past. A number of clues we find throughout the game, especially in the sanitarium, point to the fact that when he was a child of 6 or 7 years, his mother attempted to gas herself and Travis because she was told to do so by beings she saw in the mirror.
I had to do it.
You had to? Please, help me understand.
That's what you do with pets. That's what you do, isn't it? And he was a pest. Oh, he was a bad boy. Always has been. I tried to pretend he wasn't, but they were there to make sure I didn't forget.
They?
The people in the mirrors. They see it all.
They survived the incident, and his mother was transferred to Silent Hill's Cedar Grove Sanitarium for mental delusions, and his father took the sole care of him. But as Richard Grady couldn't cope with the loss of his wife, he hung himself in the Riverside Motel, and Travis stayed alone in the room for hours, talking to his dead father like he was still alive. These incidents were major catalysts for Travis Grady's mental disorder. Constant flashbacks, vivid memories, recurring dreams, as well as repressing traumatic memories. Throughout the entire game, Travis is forgetful about central memories of his childhood, but he has also begun to relive them in constant flashbacks. We also find written notes that indicate Travis is a lucid dreamer and he sees unexplainable things in his dreams, even the Butcher himself, but we get to him later. Avoidance of circumstances associated with a stressor, in this case his mother. This becomes clear in the way Travis sees his mother, because the conscious part of him still accepts her as his mother, sees her in a very positive light, despite her having tried to take his life. We find documents that tell the story of him breaking into the sanitarium as a child to see her. Only later in the game we uncover the other side of his perception of Helen, when he's forced to fight a projection of his memory of her, or rather of the way he experienced her in her confinement. And alterations in relations with others, including self-isolation and distrust. Travis is a rather close personality. Aside from him being a man of few words in conversations, his occupation as a truck driver supports this leaning towards isolation, being on the road on his own all the time. And we also see his socially distant behavior in the dialogues with Lisa, especially the one in the theater, where Lisa is really flirty towards him, but Travis reacts rather dismissive, stoic, and unemotional. Adding to that, there's also the possibility that Travis was actually a Vietnam veteran. It's just hints, but if we look at the time frame, we know that Silent Hill Origins takes place exactly 7 years before Silent Hill 1, because Cheryl, Harry Mason's adoptive daughter, is born at the end of the game, and she's 7 years old in Silent Hill 1. The date of that title is not exactly known, but it's generally agreed on that it takes place in 1985 or 86, which hints at Origins taking place in 1978 or 79. Travis Grady is a man in his early 40s. During the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975, he would have been around 25 years old, which would make him a candidate for war. And he also shows some extensive knowledge of firearms. He can tell the difference between an AK-47 and its Chinese copy, the Type 56, which happens to be one of the most common weapons of foot soldiers among the Viet Cong and the NVA during the Vietnam War. So Travis Grady probably suffers from PTSD, all well and good, but that still doesn't explain the presence, his connection to the Butcher. It starts getting really interesting when we take into consideration that PTSD is one of the very common comorbid mental diseases that serve as a foundation for what's known as dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. And the game is actually full of hints and symbolisms that support this idea, that Travis Grady has a split personality, a second persona locked inside of him that he isn't aware of. We can find various documents that hint at this. For example, in the theater, we find a document called An Id Torn in Two. The id, as explained in last week's episode, is a part of the Freudian model of the psyche that resembles a person's most basic instinctual drives. The document explains that throughout case studies, we see the victim's brain struggling to cope with a conflict caused by abuse at the hands of a loved one. In many of the cases, the abused child's self appears to be split in two. One personality continues to love the abuser and seek their approval. The other personality contains all the rage and anger of the abused and in many ways becomes a mirror of the abuser, seeking to inflict its pain on others. Sadly, it is often this self that becomes dominant. This coincides with what we said before. Travis is torn in the way he thinks and feels about his mother. His alter ego is the one that absorbs all the hate and anger that both his mother inflicted on him and he feels towards her. It's comparable to the story of Angela in Silent Hill 2, who was raped and abused by her father as a child and feels both a bitter hatred and resentment towards him, while still longing for his love and forgiveness at the same time. But this document could also refer to another character in the game, Alessa Gillespie. The split personality is one of this character's central themes. She even knowingly splits her soul in half at the end of the game. When you think about it, there are actually a lot of parallels between Alessa and Travis. In the beginning, we save her from the burning house, where her mother tried to kill her, so both had abusive parents that tried to murder them in their childhood. Through that, Alessa and Travis seem to share some sort of spiritual connection, as she constantly seeks him out telepathically for help. And they both have developed powerful psychic abilities through this trauma. For example, Travis Grady is the only protagonist in the entire series that can traverse between Silent Hill's fog world and the other world at will through mirrors. And I think it's not a coincidence that the document before used the word mirror to describe the split personality, because mirrors are one of the most potent symbols for the duality of Travis Grady's persona. All the other protagonists of the Silent Hill games had no control over when they were carried over to the other world. They were seeking for a truth inside of themselves, but when Travis travels over to the most sinister part of Silent Hill, he assumes his dark self, the one that the Butcher represents. And the Butcher, in contrast to Pyramid Head or Valchiel, he outright murders people. He mutilates women by splitting their abdomen, their reproductive organs in half. This symbolizes a deep hatred for everything that is inherently female, the ability to bring a child into this world. Think about it, everything started because Helen Grady, his mother, the person that brought Travis into this world, claimed that she saw beings in the mirror that told her that there's something evil inside of her son, that Travis is a devil's child and that she had to kill him because of that. But we know that the other world exists, and we know that the mirrors form a path into it. That she didn't lie about the beings in the mirror, and that she was maybe even right about the evil part inside of Travis. That made him become the Butcher. The being that represents the truth that Travis Grady is, in fact, a serial killer himself. And when we look closer, there's overwhelming evidence for that. Notice how a lot of the mirrors are placed inside of bathrooms? But it's always the women's bathroom Travis uses to travel to the other world, to assume his dark persona, where we, not coincidentally, never get to see the Butcher. When Travis stumbles upon him, it's irritating how stoic he reacts to the atrocities he commits. Only a person who is used to seeing monstrosities like these could stay so calm and quiet in such a situation. And when he confronts him later in the motel kitchen, the motel being the place where his transformation actually started, Travis defeats the Butcher and takes up his great cleaver and kills him swiftly. With a weapon that is so ridiculously large and heavy that it's a burden even for the Butcher himself, but Travis wields it with an uncanny ease and familiarity. In the motel room where Travis's father died, we find a dark room filled with photos. Photos of murder victims, as we find out. Photos like the ones on the dashboard of Travis's truck. And when we peek through a hole in the wall, we see the Butcher standing in that dark room, calmly, almost like he's admiring the photos, admiring his work. And even more evidence for this can be found in the dark ending of the game, that we reach by killing at least 200 enemies throughout the game. We see Travis strapped to a bed and hear voices in his head, voices of women in panic.
What are you talking about? I'm not your mama! Please! No!
Travis's victims, the Butcher's victims. The victims of a serial killer that mutilates women that resemble the epitome of Travis's hatred, his mother. But Travis Grady has no recollection of the atrocities his alter ego committed, because the Butcher is the Mr. Hyde to Travis's Dr. Jekyll. So thanks for watching Monsters of the Week. Now it's your turn to choose where the path leads. Until then, remember, the truth is out there.